At exactly 4:43 on a moonless morning in the Strait of Hormuz, 27 Iranian fast attack craft broke from their holding pattern and pointed their bows northeast at a combined closing speed that would bring them to weapons range in under 9 minutes. No transponders active, no radio calls on bridge-to-bridge frequencies, no identification signals of any kind. Just 27 fiberglass hulls running at 65 knots toward the USS Carl Vinson, a nuclear-powered Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, displacing 104,000 tons with a crew of 5,000 and an air wing capable of projecting combat power across 500 miles in any direction. The Iranian crews believed in the mathematics of their approach. 27 boats moving faster than anything a ship can outrun, splitting into multiple attack corridors simultaneously, forcing defenders to divide their attention across vectors that couldn't all be covered at once. It was a doctrine refined across 4 decades of Revolutionary Guard naval exercises. It had worked in simulations. It had looked credible in every war game Bandar Abbas had run since the tanker conflicts of the 1980s. What it had never been tested against was a sensor network that saw all 27 contacts simultaneously from the moment they left their moorings. The Carl Vinson wasn't sailing unescorted. It never does. The USS Pinckney, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, held position 3,800 yards off the carrier's port beam. The USS Dewey covered the starboard side at similar distance. Between the two destroyers and the carrier, overlapping fields of sensor coverage left no gap in the defensive geometry large enough for anything moving at 65 knots to slip through undetected. A Mark VI patrol boat ran the outer screen at 18 nautical miles. Her crew the first eyes on the incoming formation when the contacts resolved from fishing vessel ambiguity to threat geometry. They resolved fast. At 14 miles, the pattern was clear to anyone who understood Iranian Revolutionary Guard doctrine. The loose spread. The three-pronged divergence beginning to develop as the outer boats started their flanking turns. The absence of any deceleration or course change that would suggest a vessel that didn't intend to close to combat range. The Mark VI's commanding officer had the contact report transmitted to the strike group before the Iranians had crossed the 12-mile threshold. 0444. 2 MH-60R Seahawk helicopters were airborne from the Pinckney's flight deck within 90 seconds of the threat assessment reaching the Combat Information Center. Each aircraft carried a crew of 4, an M240D door gun and 4 AGM-114 Hellfire missiles mounted on external pylons. They climbed to 2,000 feet and swung south toward the incoming formation, putting themselves above and behind the threat axis before the Iranian boats had covered another mile. From that altitude, the full picture was visible in a way no surface ship could replicate. 27 contacts in a formation already beginning to separate. The lead element was tightening into a spearhead aimed directly at the carrier. A flanking group of 8 boats was curving wide to come around the Dewey's northern side. A third cluster of 6 was spreading east in what would become, if they reached it, a position that bracketed the entire strike group from the stern quarter. Whoever planned this had studied American carrier defense geometries carefully. The problem was that studying a defense geometry and defeating it are 2 entirely different problems. Let's talk about what those Iranian boats were actually carrying, because the gap between their weapons and the systems waiting for them defines everything about how this engagement concluded. The primary fast attack craft in the formation were Blade Runner-derived Steregushchiy-class variants, constructed from fiberglass with twin diesel engines capable of 85 knots in calm water. Iranian shipyards have been producing them in volume since the mid-2000s. The hull cost roughly $300,000 to build. Each boat in this formation mounted either a 12.7mm heavy machine gun on an improvised forward mount, a rocket-propelled grenade launcher array, or a rack for unguided 107mm rockets. Several of the larger boats in the flanking element carried what appeared to be C-14 anti-ship missiles, a Chinese origin weapon the Iranians have produced under license. Subsonic, radar-guided, 100-kilogram warhead. A real threat to a surface combatant if it can be fired from within its 35-kilometer range and the defensive systems are occupied elsewhere. That last condition was the entire theory of the swarm. Keep the defenders busy with the lead element. Slip the missile boats through on the flanks. The Aegis combat system aboard the Pinckney didn't experience the engagement the way a human operator would. Sequentially, managing one threat at a time. The AN/S-PY-1D phased array radar tracked all 27 contacts simultaneously, updating position and velocity data multiple times per second, cross-referencing each track against classification criteria. computing weapons assignments, and presenting the tactical action officer with an engagement picture that had already been optimized before the first order was given. The system wasn't overwhelmed by 27 contacts. 27 contacts was well inside its designed operating envelope, 0450. The lead element had closed to 7 miles. The flanking boats were executing their turns. The third group was reaching its spread position east of the formation. A Seahawk pilot watching the flanking group from 2,000 feet radioed what he could see. 4 of the 8 boats in the northern flanking element had slowed. Crews were visible on deck moving toward what the pilot described as launcher positions on the forward mounts. The C-14 boats were preparing to fire. The tactical action officer aboard the Pinckney had clear rules of engagement and a picture that left no ambiguity about intent. Weapons free. Now, before the engagement sequence, it's worth understanding the Phalanx Block 1B, because this system is central to what happened in the next 4 minutes, and it's routinely misunderstood by people who think of it only as an anti-missile weapon. The original Phalanx was designed in the 1970s to kill anti-ship missiles in their terminal phase, a last-ditch defense against fast, low-flying targets that had already defeated every other layer. It did that job well. The Block 1B upgrade, introduced in the mid-2000s, added a forward-looking infrared sensor and a surface search mode that fundamentally changed what the system could engage. It can now track and fire on small surface targets at wave-top level. A fiberglass speedboat at 65 knots is a legitimate Phalanx target. The system's M61A1 Vulcan rotary cannon fires 20mm tungsten penetrator rounds at 4,500 rounds per minute, 75 rounds per second. The dispersion pattern at 1,500 yards is tight enough to put multiple rounds through an object the size of a boat engine with every burst. It runs autonomously. The operator sets the engagement parameters and authorizes surface engagement mode. After that, the system makes its own firing decisions faster than any human can replicate. The Phalanx on the Dewey acquired the lead element at 1,900 yards. The system tracked silently for the 1.4 seconds required to confirm closing velocity and threat classification. Then the barrels began spinning. The sound a Phalanx makes in live engagement has been described as a buzzsaw cutting through wet lumber at industrial speed. The burst lasts between 1 and 3 seconds, depending on target range and the system's kill probability calculation. The lead Iranian boat received a 1.8-second burst. What came out the other side of those rounds was not a boat. The fiberglass hull, the twin diesel engines, the fuel tanks, the improvised weapon mount, the Phalanx doesn't distinguish between them. The rounds go through everything. The fuel tanks ignited in a secondary explosion that was visible from the carrier's bridge 9 miles away. 4 seconds later, the second burst, a second boat gone. The Seahawk helicopters had already opened fire on the flanking element. The AGM-114 Hellfire carries a 9-kilogram shaped charge warhead originally designed to penetrate tank armor. Against a fiberglass hull with exposed fuel tanks, it is, to put it in engineering terms, dramatically oversized for the target. The first Hellfire impacted the lead boat of the missile-carrying flanking element and produced an explosion that destroyed 2 adjacent boats through secondary fragmentation and fuel fire. 3 boats for 1 missile, an outcome the targeting math hadn't budgeted for. The M24OD door guns took the remaining flanking boats under fire from above and behind, 7.62 millimeters at 800 rounds per minute. Traces every 4th round walking across the water in visible correction sequences. 3 boats disabled, engines destroyed, crews abandoning into the strait. The Eastern Spread Group, the 6 boats positioned to bracket the formation from the stern quarter, had been watching all of this happen in real time. They were 6 miles from the nearest American ship. They had seen in under 3 minutes what happened when Iranian fast attack craft reached Phalanx engagement range. They turned south. The Pinckney's Mk-38 Mod 3 Bushmaster chain gun, a 25mm autocannon with a stabilized electro-optical fire control system, engaged 2 of the retreating boats as they turned. The system tracked them through the turn and fired while they were still accelerating away. Neither boat sank. The rounds disabled engines and punctured hulls without hitting fuel, but both lost propulsion and wallowed dead in the water with crews that went into life vests immediately. 0457. The engagement ended 4 minutes and roughly 30 seconds from the first Phalanx burst. 6 Iranian boats destroyed, 5 disabled. 16 withdrew south at maximum speed toward Iranian territorial waters. No American ship had been struck. No American sailor had been injured. The Carl Vinson had not altered its heading by a single degree throughout the entire engagement. Flight operations were suspended for 11 minutes while the combat air patrol was repositioned. They resumed at 0512. Here's what the intelligence harvest from those 4 minutes was worth, because it's easy to focus on the kinetic outcome and miss the analytical one. Every radar emission from every boat in that formation was captured by the Pinckney's electronic warfare suite and the Dewey's AN/SLQ-32 system. Every frequency, every pulse width, every scan rate. The fire control radar signatures from the C-14 missile boats were recorded in detail during the moments those crews were preparing to fire. That data is now part of the library American naval planners used to build electronic warfare responses against Iranian anti-ship missiles. The Iranians revealed their upgraded emission profiles while attempting an attack, and those profiles are now in American databases permanently. The tactical formation itself was analyzed before the boats reached Iranian waters. The three-pronged geometry, the timing of the flanking turn relative to the lead element's advance, the moment the missile boats slowed to launch preparation, all of it was logged and forwarded to Pacific Fleet and Fifth Fleet intelligence staffs within hours. The next time Iranian planners run a swarm exercise, American analysts will be watching the exercise through assets the planners don't know about, using pattern recognition models that were updated with data from this morning. The theory behind swarm tactics is sound, and it's worth engaging with honestly rather than dismissing it. The principle goes back to the tanker wars of the 1980s, when Iranian fast boats found real success harassing commercial shipping and smaller naval vessels. The core logic is attrition through volume. A destroyer carries a finite magazine. A carrier group's defensive resources, however capable, are bounded. Send enough simultaneous threats from enough axes, and eventually the math tips toward the attacker. Some boats get through, some missiles reach launch parameters, some of the swarm finds the gap. The logic fails against Aegis and Phalanx for a specific reason that Iranian planners have not solved. The assumption that volume creates sensor overload no longer holds when the tracking architecture can handle hundreds of simultaneous contacts without degradation. The Pinckney wasn't prioritizing targets. The system was managing all 27 simultaneously, maintaining solutions and executing engagements in an order optimized by its own threat ranking algorithms. The human operators were supervising, not processing. That distinction makes the entire mathematical premise of the swarm irrelevant against this particular defensive configuration. What the swarm would need to succeed against a modern American carrier strike group is a way to get inside Phalanx range without being engaged first. That requires either defeating the outer sensor layers, the helicopters, the patrol boats, the ship radars, or attacking in conditions where those sensors are degraded. Neither condition existed this morning. Neither condition is easy to engineer deliberately against a strike group that has been tracking the threat since it left port. The cost breakdown requires almost no commentary to make its point. Iran deployed 27 fast attack craft. Operational costs for a 2-hour high-speed mission, fuel, crew, pre-deployment maintenance, run approximately $2,200 per boat. Total operational expenditure before losses, roughly $60,000. 6 boats destroyed at an average replacement cost of $300,000 each, $1.8 million in hardware. 5 boats disabled, recoverable but requiring significant repair, perhaps $600,000 in damage. Intelligence exposure in the form of radar signatures and tactical doctrine now filed in American databases. Not quantifiable in dollars, but not recoverable at any price. Total Iranian cost of the engagement, somewhere above $3 million in tangible losses, plus the intelligence liability, plus the domestic and regional credibility cost of a retreat that state media will have to explain. American expenditure, approximately 140 Phalanx rounds at $46 each, 4 Hellfire missiles at $150,000 each, several hundred rounds of 7.62mm and 25mm ammunition, helicopter fuel, total under $700,000 in consumables, 0 replacement costs, 0 casualty costs, 0 damage repair. 5 Iranian crews were recovered from the water by Iranian Coast Guard vessels over the following 2 hours, transferred under international maritime law without incident. They went home. What they told their commanders about the speed of the engagement, about Phalanx firing before most of their formation had fully processed what was happening, about the helicopters already in position above the flanking element before the flanking move was halfway complete. Those accounts were probably more strategically damaging to Revolutionary Guard planning assumptions than the material losses. The Carl Vinson logged the engagement at 4 minutes 30 seconds. Flight operations resumed 16 minutes after the last boat withdrew. The mess served breakfast at 0600 as scheduled. Iranian state media broadcast footage of Revolutionary Guard sailors in the Strait of Hormuz that evening. Brave confrontation with American aggression in sovereign Iranian waters. The navigation logs recorded by the carrier's own systems. The radar tracks from both destroyers showing Iranian boats closing at attack speed with weapons in firing position. The Seahawk pilot's video documentation of launcher preparation on the flanking element. None of that footage aired. But it existed, and every naval intelligence service in the region capable of accessing classified American after-action summaries would read it within the week. Beijing's naval attaché filed a report. Moscow's military intelligence directorate updated its threat assessment models for American carrier defensive envelopes. The Gulf states, which have their own complicated relationships with Iranian naval posturing in the Strait, noted the engagement duration and the absence of American casualties and drew their own conclusions about the practical value of Revolutionary Guard fast attack doctrine as a deterrent. This is what deterrence actually looks like when it's functioning. Not a standoff, not a negotiated de-escalation, a 4-minute demonstration that the gap between Iranian fast attack capability and American carrier defense technology is not a gap that aggression can close. The boats were fast, the doctrine was practiced, the crews were trained. None of it was sufficient because speed and numbers only produce the intended outcome when the defender can't track and engage faster than the attacker can close. The phalanx was already firing before the lead element had finished processing that it was in an engagement. That time differential, the gap between when the American system recognized a threat and responded and when the Iranian crews understood they were already inside a weapons envelope, is the actual measure of where deterrence lives. It doesn't live in diplomatic statements or sanctions or formal protests. It lives in that gap, in 4 minutes and 30 seconds, in 27 boats leaving port and 16 returning. They came looking for leverage. They found geometry. Some engagements are decided by courage. This one was decided by the speed of light moving through a fire control computer. And somewhere in Bandar Abbas, planners staring at satellite photos of 6 sunken hulls and an American carrier that never changed course are doing the math on what it would actually take to change that outcome next time. The answer they keep arriving at is expensive, and it isn't speedboats. If this breakdown gave you something to think about, share it and subscribe. The engagements that reshape doctrine are rarely the ones that make headlines.